let me start by looking at the social dimensions of mental health from a personal anecdotal experience. I was a student of 7th class. That was the time when my parents, my father, decided to admit me in an English medium school. Till 6th class, I was a student of Telugu medium, that is studying in a normal government Jilla Parishad school. I was moved to a missionary English medium school. It was a culture shock. It was a massive challenge because I have learned alphabets in class 4 and little words in class 5 and suddenly had to study in English medium in class 7. So it was an Herculean task, it's a humongous challenge, and I was finding it extremely difficult to cope with it. My father's determination to make me study in English medium and my own self inclination not to accept defeat in life made me to face this challenge head on. At one point of time, I was thoroughly disillusioned because I used to know the answers in Telugu but can't answer it in English. I know the answer in Telugu but I can't write, I can't express it in English. And it was extremely difficult to even understand the lessons. I failed continuously, I failed consecutive unit test, I failed in consecutive unit test. And I was little worried because I was not, I was admitted on a condition. The father of the missionary school was not keen on admitting me because he was not confident that I will make it. But my father offered him a proposal. By the time of yearly examinations, if my son is not above the first of, there was the class was having a strength of 40. If there are not, if he is not below the rank of 20, so you can give him TC, I will get him admitted again in Telugu medium school. So it was a challenge to be within the top 20 rank in the off-field examination. Given that enormous pressure on me, I have decided one day to end my life and went to a well on the school campus and about to jump into the well. Suddenly, a classmate called Benjamin came to the place and he asked me what was he doing, what was I doing. He was not aware what I was intended to do. So it immediately distracted my attention. I started thinking of my parents, my siblings, and more than that, I was thinking about how society views me after the tragic event if it occurs. So I was not ready to accept the defeat. That was my personality even today. So this made me to come out of that horrendous situation and take it as a challenge. And believe me, in the off-yearly examination, not within 20 ranks, I stood class first. That's how my life journey began. So why I'm narrating this anecdotal experience is this is the time to speak openly, publicly on issues of mental health. There are a lot of stigma attached to it. There are a lot of social discrimination. People do not realize the fact that the mind is also like any other organ, like a heart, like a liver, like a lungs or kidneys. And when a kidney or heart or lungs or liver can go wrong, obviously the mind can also go wrong. But the physical ailments are taken as a routine kind of things, whereas the mental illness is stigmatized beyond a point. A lot of superstitions associated with it. And in one of the meetings, I have even suggested the word mental should be replaced by something else. So because the word mental has over a period of time assumed a derogatory meaning. People even in films use the word, should we send you to the mental hospital? So it's almost like a criminalize. Unfortunately, we have to decriminalize the word mental. So why this kind of a problem has come? Because the language also has a meaning in it. I'll give you a small example. If the government gives out something to poor, it is called subsidy. If the government gives something to the rich, it is called incentive. When you hear the word subsidy, you get irritated. Economy will go to dogs if the government goes on giving subsidies. If you hear the word incentive, you feel like giving more. So the language has a meaning associated with it. So my suggestion, I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but the word mental, which has acquired a derogatory meaning over a period of time, that was not the intended meaning of the word. We need to replace it with a more humane, more inclusive word. Perhaps you'll have to invent something like psychological well-being or something else. So why I'm telling this is we are living in a stigmatized environment. So we have to look at, I really appreciate the Hyderabad Psychiatric Society and the leading doctors to understand the problem of medicine, problem of health in a social context. I was one day attending a meeting of pulmonologists. So I was trying to read something about asthma. And to my great surprise, I realized a concept called battered woman syndrome, subject to correction by the doctors. It means if a woman has a nagging husband, her vulnerability to asthma increases. She is most likely to be a victim of asthma. So I don't know, there will be a battered men syndrome. It's possible that you may even have a nagging wife. So, but the Indian social reality, there's a greater possibility for a woman to be a victim of nagging husband than the other way around. So, therefore, if you look at the problem of asthma only from a medical point of view, you may not perhaps find a solution to it totally. So medicine has to operate in a social context. We need to understand the social contours of medicine. And I was reading the World Health Organization report on social determinants of mental health. The Bangalore-based National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences estimated that one among every 6 Indians need help in regard to the mental health. That means 1 out of every 6 Indians require some or other professional help to deal with the mental health. But do we have such a large number of professionally trained people to handle the kind of situation? If I have to believe the observations made by the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, I'm sure the mental health will be called epidemic, if not pandemic. So the reason for this is we need to understand the health and medicine from a social context, especially human beings do not operate in social vacuum. So therefore, as the World Health Organization points out, mental health operates in a social, economic, and physical environment. Even research studies reveal that even environmental destruction has a debilitating effect on the mental health. The studies reveal that exposure to nature, like greenery, like water, will improve the mental health to a great extent. So this indicates that the problem of mental illness is a function of a host of factors, ranging from social, economic, lifestyle, to the environmental and technological changes that are underway. So how do we look at this problem? So when we look at this problem, we have to look at it from a multidimensional point of view and from a life course perspective. The WHO recommends life course perspective right from the childhood. The reasons for the mental illness may vary from each stage of our life. The young children, adolescents, middle age, old age, the factors vary and so as the treatment protocols, as the solutions should also vary. So, what are the reasons for that? We are living in a society dictated by the unprecedented consumerism. So, this, especially India, is an emerging middle class society with a massive surge in consumption levels. Well, the pandemic might have had a negative impact, but India is a country which is a supermarket of consumerism. So this consumerism, and we are living in a media world, a dazzling media world, where messages are taken to the people independent of their socio-economic standards. An advertisement of a lavish villa or a luxurious car is seen by a person who can afford it and a person who cannot even dream to afford it. So this, as Daniel Lerner, eminent sociologist, in a book called The Passing of Traditional Society, says a tremendous commodity consciousness in a highly iniquitous society can result in revolution of rising frustrations. So this is the one reason the consumerism in a blistering media world, in a society where we are nurturing tremendous commodity consciousness with so economic standards do not in any way match the kind of consumption boom that we are witnessing. So how do we address this problem? So the second aspect is the social inequalities. So there is unprecedented social inequalities, and they are increasing over a period of time. So these inequalities are simply mind-boggling. The Oxfam study reveals that 1% of Indians own more than 50% of national income. So in this kind of an economy, this kind of a society, where there is a coexistence of filthy prosperity on one side and abysmal poverty on the other side, how do people reconcile between the two? Do the people have the mental capacity, psychological stamina to reconcile with this unprecedented contrast in life? So how do we bridge these inequalities to ensure a reasonable mental well-being? Third aspect is, when you have such a level of inequalities in society, obviously the combination of consumerism and a unbelievable inequalities is a tremendous urge in the people for upward mobility. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people were not really imagining this kind of life which they are imagining today. So people used to accept something as a given. Well, of course, the concept of karma siddhanta proposed by our Indian cultural ethos might have also contributed to that. And today, it is possible to achieve which was seemingly impossible. So the reality is that if someone who, like Sundar Pichai, who used to go to tuition, sitting on the back of his father's scooter, can today become the CEO of the world's most powerful company. So this is the level of upward mobility possible in a knowledge economy. We are living in a knowledge economy where economies are not merely built by the physical and natural resources. Economies in the knowledge-based global societies are increasingly built on human resources. So knowledge is the bedrock of economy. Knowledge is the resource today. So therefore, when we are living in an economy where an ordinary individual can also become a CEO of the world's most powerful company. So this is not a Bollywood thriller. This is not a Tollywood cinema. It is a reality. So given this reality on one side, and also the unbelievable inequalities coupled with consumerism create a tremendous pressure on today's young generation for upward mobility. Nothing wrong. People who believe in motivating the youth obviously encourage them to dream big, chase the big dreams. But in the process, their social and economic living standards may not permit them to achieve those. We are unable to teach our children how to reconcile with the reality in case the dreams are not fulfilled. So there is a tremendous pressure of the parental dreams and the dreams of the young boys and girls on the young minds today. And if you look at the studies on depression and suicides among the young people, the one of the most important reason for this is the yawning gap between ambition, aspiration, and the ability to realize or accomplish that aspiration. Well, aspiration need not be the personal aspiration. It can be a parental aspiration. It can be a community aspiration. When someone struggles to bridge between the levels of aspiration and the levels of ability, whether it may be social or economic or personal or intellectual, then the person faces a serious crisis. This is the time when a young boy or a young girl needs to engage in a conversation. Conversation with whom? Conversation with the family, community, and extended family. Quite unfortunately, the atomized life, where life is, we're not just talking about nuclear families. We are even talking about atomic families. We are living in a family environment mediated by technology. So people interact within the family through WhatsApp. People interact within a house through chat box. So given this kind of a technology mediated human communication, what's really happening is a conversation that keeps the mental well-being, conversation between the parent and the kid, conversation between siblings, conversation between neighbors, conversation within the community is seriously undermined by a host of factors. So obviously, when this conversation is replaced by a chaotic relationship, then the problem becomes acute. So this results in a greater peer pressure on the young minds and causing depression, causing mental illness, etc. So we need to educate not just the children, but even the parents and the community in that. Of course, the third aspect is the economic reality. Today, on one side, I have done a very quick survey in several engineering colleges, some of the prestigious engineering colleges. To my great surprise, I found people who are studying in engineering, 60% do not like engineering subject, but still they study engineering. They study engineering not because they like it. They study engineering because they believe and their parents believe that that's the only better way to achieve good things in life. So as a result of it, you are in a constant friction between what is appealing to your brain and what you are compelled to study. This conflict is creating a tremendous pressure. So we need to reform the education system where even by compulsion, a person might have entered into a course, but still he should have an opportunity to take up at least a few courses that appeal to the taste, appeal to the inclination of the human brain. But unfortunately, we have a very tunnel view of education where we think that a student of engineering will waste his time if he studies anything other than engineering, which is absolutely unscientific. As a legislator, I was vehemently demanding that all professional courses should have other aspects of it also. Well, A doctor should be taught about communication skills. A doctor should be taught about persuasive skills. An engineer has to be taught about social sciences, so that you will not only create technocrats, but you will in fact create the thinking individuals. So human brain is capable of performing multiple tasks. Human brain is capable of appreciating multiple things. Well, I'm good. I study. I love political science. I love economics. I love Telugu literature. I love even biological sciences. So there is no contradiction between the two. So I read mythology and I read political thought. So I read philosophy to history. So there is no conflict between the two. So my love for political science does not exclude me from my interest in economics. So this is the world where branches of knowledge are converging also. Biology marries information technology to create bioinformatics. Nanotechnology is a combination of several sciences. So this is the age. Even philosophy is combined with Buddhist concept of mindfulness, is combined with journalism to create a new world. I was reading the research in Harvard School of Medicine, which tells that writing as a hobby will work as a great painkiller. Even if somebody is suffering from a chronic pain due to cancer, can feel relief if he is engaged in act of writing. Well, this is where we have to create bridges between various aspects of human activity. Quite unfortunately, we don't do that. A student of engineering, if he pursues music because the person loves it, I'm sure his life, his mental well-being will be much more superior. If I love something and I pursue something else, that conflict and contradiction results in a tremendous stress on the mental health. So this is not the job of the only the psychiatrist. It's the job of the policymakers to create an educational situation which allows the child not to pursue divergent yet divergent fields of human endeavor. So quite unfortunately, our system do not permit that. And economic changes. Today, the studies reveal that the pandemic has resulted in a very higher levels of mental stress, precisely because of two things. One, the kind of isolated environment in which the person is compelled to live for a longer periods of time, which was unprecedented in our lifetime at least. And secondly, the economic uncertainty resulting in the pandemic-induced economic crisis. The wage cuts and job cuts are become an order of the day. So there is a tremendous economic uncertainty, and a combination of economic uncertainty with that of the physical isolation from social environment is resulting in a tremendous pressure on the mental health. I'm sure as the professionals who deal with the mental well-being, you are more competent to throw light on that. But my impression is that there is unreported mental illness during the age of pandemic. Quite unfortunately, this is completely unattended to in any policy discourse today. So I have talked about economic aspects. I talked about social aspects. I talked about environmental destruction also. The proximity between man and nature. When I use the word man, I'm not using in gender sense. When the proximity between human beings and nature is lost and an eminent disconnect is created between nature and human living, this has an unbelievable stress on the on the mental well-being. So we need to promote an eco-friendly living. We need to blend nature with human living. That requires even urban planning also. Lung spaces are simply depreciating over a period of time. Water bodies are encroached upon. So I am sure if somebody makes a study on the environmental destruction in a urban habitat, with that of the increasing number of cases of mental illness, I'm sure you would find a correlation between the two. So therefore, a range of solutions need to be attempted. Of course, technology is also creating a kind of a situation where human interaction is replaced by interaction with the help of electronic gadgets. The media, for example, I'm sure if somebody who has an unstable mind watches our television debates, he will become more chaotic. So I personally participate in several TV debates. I know kind of shouting matches which are played on television channels. If somebody is emotionally attached to the subject of the debate, he will definitely undergo an unprecedented stress. The reason why is in a bid to legitimize the two extremes, because a conflict between two extremes is a marketing technique. That is the reason television channels promote not a dialogue, but a confrontation between two extreme thoughts. And that is a kind of agonizing impact on the human mind. So this kind of the environment in which we are living, the social environment, so all these have an impact on the mental well-being.